And she said they have to be extremely immunocompromised in order to have that. She said it's too rare. And I said, well, if it is rare, then it's rare, but he has it. And I pointed it out to her. And this woman was in absolute denial. So, of course, then my son, in the sun, this tinea versicolor, it actually gets worse if you're out in the sun, typically. And the spot that had appeared when he first had it, after, when I started visiting him again, and he had been out in the sun for summer, he got another spot on his, he had another spot right about there on the side of his cheek. And actually, I'm looking at the camera right now, so when I look straight at the camera and I see this frame of my face, I point to the side, but it was on the side of his face. Because he would be turned this way to me, and the spot was right there, and I'd be sitting over here, and I remember looking over at it, and I noticed, and I said something to the visitation monitor, who was then Sue, and I said, he still has this tinea versicolor. There's a spot right there on his face, and I believe that she wrote it down in the visitation notes. And then those visitation notes get entered into a state system, a state computer database. And the next time that I saw my son, the next visit, which was only a couple days later, somebody that he had a cut, it was after the weekend had passed, so it was like on the Monday. He had a entire cut on that side of his face, and that spot, which was about the size of a medium-sized mole, the spot was gone because somebody had literally cut it out of my son's face. The only one who had the only group that had a motive to hide the fact that my son had that problem and it was being concealed would have been the female doctor that worked at Wenatchee Valley Medical Center, who diagnosed my tinea versicolor and tried to say my son didn't have it. She would have a motive to lie and want someone to cut that out of my son's face to try to say that my son never had this and remove evidence. And Dr. Butler, Malcolm Butler, would be interested in cutting it out of my son's face because he was in denial over the fact that he refused to treat us at all to begin with. And any kind of mafia that it's connected to them that would have been interested in minimizing liability of a lawsuit, they would have cut that out of my son's face. My aunt and uncle couldn't have cared less. My aunt and uncle, Avila, never would have taken a knife and cut this spot out of my son's face. So, this is the kind of horror that my son and I have been going through in this country. And when I think about it, actually, I was just now thinking about that girl from Pakistan that was singled out. I think it was to send a message. I don't think it was specifically to hurt her, really, as much as it was to send a message of some kind. That's my intuitive feeling about it. But I saw the photo of her lying on the stretcher, and she had a spot right there, right exactly where the one from my son's tinea versicolor was. Same size, same shape for her. It was a mole. For my son, it was a spot on that side of his face that people in Wenatchee carved out of my son's face. How does someone get away with doing something like that? And then Michelle Erickson and CPS are concealing that kind of crime. And then, Judge Alicia Nakata is telling me to never talk about Michelle Erickson. There are violent criminal judges and state workers that have actively colluded to conceal crimes of torture against my son. And then what I was being told was, just be grateful that he's with your family. Because they knew that I knew that my aunt and uncle didn't do that to my son. But they were obviously being threatened or tortured themselves and coerced to not say anything. And the whole threat was that much worse would happen if everybody didn't shut up and allow this kind of torture to continue against Oliver Garrett. When my son saw me at that visit and this was cut out of his face, he was in an almost shock state. He was almost like comatose. He was hardly speaking, trying to speak at all. He was despondent and he stared off listlessly into space. That was not the only time that he was brought to a visit like that. When Michelle Erickson opened the door to let him out of the visit, it wasn't the visitation monitor was Sue, the red-haired woman who I've already described in one of my clips. But the woman who opened the door to tell my son and I that the visit was over, who wanted to be there, I guess, to see what my facial reaction was after I had seen my son, was Michelle Erickson. I would really like to know why Judge Alicia Nakata was so interested in protecting a criminal like Michelle Erickson. Michelle Erickson, who worked with the military, with the Navy, in Seattle, in the Seattle Bainbridge area, on an island. Kind of like Michelle's Island. And then I later found out she was having communications with a different U.S. Army person who was connected with his entire family to the U.S. military, like very career military. I was forced at one point later, which I'll get into, to live with him. And nothing happened at all, but I was basically, it was a situation where I was forced to live there. And then I found out Michelle and he, or the two of them, he and Michelle were discussing me and meeting regularly. And Michelle was the CPS social worker. So it was Michelle Erickson who wanted to open the door and see my expression on my face after I saw that a chunk of my son's face was cut out. And I said to her, "Do you see this?" I said, "I want that documented." And she said, "It's just a scratch." And then later she sent me an email saying it's just a scratch. And actually, it was right after I had brought up the fact that he still had that spot on his face from Tinea versicolor that was showing up again. It was right after that Marianne McIntosh, the Attorney General for Washington State and for Wenatchee, well, her daughter is married to Chief Jones. And Jones is the chief for the Wenatchee Police Department. And I had already gone to the Wenatchee Police Department to complain about all this bruising all over my son's legs. So then all of a sudden, Marianne McIntosh, who is related to the Wenatchee Police Department person, Jones, she asked for an emergency hearing, and it was to request from Judge Hotchkiss that I be banned from taking any photos of my son or videotaping. There were two reasons they wanted to have that done. One reason was that they knew I was trying to get a photo of this mark that was on my son's face, which proved medical negligence and refusal to treat my son. It's refusal of treatment, which is sort of like breaking the law in the medical field. And to refuse treatment to a child doesn't look very good to any kind of medical facility or the doctors responsible. Especially when Dr. Malcolm Butler and this other female doctor, I could name both of them as trying to conceal the fact that they were refusing treatment to my child. So that was one reason why they wanted to have this order in place. The other reason was that Marianne McIntosh, since she was related to Chief Jones with the Wenatchee Police Department, she already knew that when I was falsely arrested for the quote-unquote grand auto theft, when the police took my purse from me, they took my video camera and they deleted all of the footage that I had saved on it that showed all of the visits with my son were normal, and they contradicted the kinds of lies that Sue, the hired visitation monitor, was making up and putting onto paper for the state. So when the police took my video cam into custody, and then while they had it in their custody, they deleted information from the visits, it's kind of looking like Chief Jones isn't very honest, and neither are his padres. And it's really looking like Marianne McIntosh has a major problem on her hands and should probably be sitting her fat butt onto a stone cold gel cell bench. The police didn't want evidence that they were not doing their job, and Marianne McIntosh, for the Attorney General, didn't want evidence that they had hired visitation monitors to lie